The funeral was silent, save for the rain drumming against the black umbrellas. Everyone stood frozen as the sheriff reached out to place a white rose on the casket. That's when Titan, the fallen soldier's 90-pound Malinois, snapped his thick leather leash like a thread. He didn't run to the coffin to mourn. He launched himself straight at the sheriff's throat. It wasn't grief. It was an execution. If stories where animals reveal the truths that humans try to bury keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The town of Oakhaven was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors, not because it was safe, but because they believed they knew their neighbors. That illusion died the day Sergeant Caleb Vance came home in a flag-draped box. Caleb had been the town's golden boy, former quarterback, decorated war hero, and finally, a specialized tracker for the state police. He had been found deep in the Blackwood Ridge, a single gunshot wound to the chest. The official report said it was a poaching ring gone wrong. A tragic random act of violence in the deep woods. Standing at the graveside was Alara Vance, Caleb's younger sister. She was 26, with eyes red from 3 days of sleeplessness and hands that trembled as she gripped the leash of the only thing Caleb had left behind, Titan. Titan was a Belgian Malinois, a weapon of war wrapped in muscle and fur. But today, he looked small. His ears were pinned back against his skull, his tail tucked between his legs. He was wearing a heavy agitation muzzle, a precaution Alara had insisted on, though the sheriff had laughed it off. "He's grieving, Alara," Sheriff Brody Miller had said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder earlier that morning. "Let the dog say goodbye." Brody Miller was the town's rock, a man with a jaw like granite and a smile that won elections. He had been Caleb's mentor, the man who pinned the badge on him. Now, he stood at the podium, delivering a eulogy that had half the town in tears. "Caleb was more than a deputy. He was a son to me, and I promise you, we will find the cowards who did this." Titan let out a sound then. It wasn't a whine. It was a low, vibrating rumble that traveled up the leash and into Alara's bones. It felt like standing next to a generator about to explode. Alara looked down. Titan wasn't looking at the casket. He wasn't looking at the crowd. His dark, amber eyes were locked on Sheriff Brody Miller with a focus so intense, it felt physical. The service ended. The rain picked up. People began to file past the casket to pay their respects. Sheriff Miller stepped down from the podium, wiping a tear from his eye. He walked toward Alara, his arms open for a hug. "I've got you, kid," Brody whispered, stepping close. Titan didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply exploded. The sound of the leather leash snapping was like a gunshot. Alara was pulled forward, stumbling into the mud. Titan hit Brody Miller in the chest with the force of a battering ram. The muzzle was the only thing that saved the sheriff's life. The impact sent the large man sprawling backward over a row of folding chairs. Screams erupted. Officers drew their weapons. "Titan, no!" Alara screamed, throwing herself on top of the thrashing dog. Titan was frantic. He was clawing at the muzzle, trying to rip it off, his eyes rolling back, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. He wasn't trying to bite out of fear. He was trying to kill. "Don't shoot! He's scared! He's just scared!" Sheriff Miller scrambled to his feet, his pristine uniform mud-stained, clutching his ribs. His eyes, usually so warm, flashed with something cold and reptilian. For a split second, Alara saw it. Pure, unadulterated hatred directed at the dog. Then the mask slipped back on. "Stand down!" Miller shouted to his deputies. He straightened his tie, breathing hard. The dog is traumatized. Caleb died in front of him. He's He's confused. Miller looked at Titan, who was still snarling beneath Ilara, staring at the sheriff with a knowledge that no animal should possess. Get him out of here, Ilara. Before I have to make a decision we both regret. Ilara dragged Titan to her beat-up sedan. She shoved him into the back seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Titan wasn't thrashing anymore. He was sitting up, staring out the back window, watching the sheriff until the cemetery disappeared from view. That night, the storm broke over Oakhaven. Thunder rattled the windows of the small cabin Ilara had inherited from Caleb. Titan paced the living room floor. Click, click, click. His claws on the hardwood were a metronome of anxiety. Ilara sat on the floor with Caleb's gear. The police department had returned his personal effects in a cardboard box. A watch, a wallet, a half-empty pack of gum, and his vest. She picked up the tactical vest. It was heavy, stiff with dried mud and something else. Dark stains. Titan stopped pacing. He walked over to Ilara and nudged the vest with his nose. Then he did something strange. He didn't sniff the bloodstains. He sniffed the inside lining of the back panel. He nudged it again, harder, then looked at Ilara and barked. A sharp demand bark. "What is it, boy?" She ran her fingers along the inside seam. It felt lumpy. There was no zipper, but the stitching looked uneven, like it had been cut and re-sewn by hand in a hurry. Ilara grabbed a pocket knife. With trembling hands, she sliced open the fabric. Something slid out and hit the floor. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't a note. It was a GPS tracker. But not police issue. This was a cheap, magnetic tracker, the kind private investigators use, and taped to the back of it was a tiny micro SD card. Ilara shoved the card into her laptop. Her hands shook so bad she had to try 3 times to get it into the slot. A single video file popped up. Date stamp. 3 days before Caleb died. She clicked play. The camera angle was low, hidden on a dashboard. It showed an old logging road deep in Blackwood Ridge. It was night. 2 trucks were parked nose to nose. Men were moving crates from one truck to the other. Ilara leaned in. The resolution was grainy, but the headlights illuminated one of the men perfectly. It wasn't a poacher. It was Sheriff Brody Miller. And he wasn't moving wildlife. He was moving vacuum-sealed bricks of heroin. I knew it. Brody, how could you? I have to get the evidence. I have to hide this where only Titan can find it. The video cut to black. Ilara sat back, the blood draining from her face. Caleb hadn't been killed by poachers. He had been executed by the man who gave the eulogy this morning. And Titan had been there. Titan had watched the sheriff pull the trigger. That's why he attacked. The dog wasn't grieving. He was the only witness. A knock at the door made Ilara jump. Titan went silent, his body lowering into a predator's crouch. "Ilara? It's Brody." The voice came through the thick oak door, muffled by the rain. "I just wanted to check on you. And the dog. I'm worried he might be unstable." Ilara's eyes darted to the laptop. She slammed it shut. "I'm fine, Brody. We're sleeping. Please, just give us tonight." A long silence. Then the doorknob jiggled. Locked. "All right, kid. You lock up tight. Bad people out there." She heard his heavy boots crunch on the gravel, walking away. But then she heard something else. The sound of a radio squelch. "Name and U.S. Guy Neural." "She's inside. 2 units around the back. Don't let her leave. We handle this tonight." Ilara scrambled to the window. Through the slats of the blinds, she saw shadows moving in the yard. They weren't here to check on her. They were here to sanitize the loose ends. She grabbed Caleb's vest, the SD card, and her keys. "Tighten, fuss," she commanded, using the German command for heel. Tighten glued himself to her leg. They couldn't go out the front. The back door led to the yard, which was fenced, but the woods beyond that. That was their only chance. Ilara opened the back door slowly. The storm masked the sound. She and Titan crept into the rain. "Hey!" a voice shouted from the side of the house. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, blinding her. "Run!" She bolted for the fence. Titan didn't just run. He cleared the 6-foot wooden fence in a single bound, waiting on the other side. Ilara scrambled over, splintering wood scraping her palms. A gunshot cracked the air, splintering the post inches from her head. They were shooting to kill. Ilara hit the ground on the other side and scrambled up. They sprinted into the Blackwood Ridge. The forest was Caleb's second home. He had taught Ilara these trails since she was a child. But tonight, the woods felt like a mouth closing around them. They ran for an hour, sliding down mud banks, tearing through brambles that sliced their skin. Behind them, the beams of flashlights swept through the trees like searching eyes. They reached the ravine, a deep, jagged scar in the earth with a raging river at the bottom. The only way across was an old service bridge, rusted and slick with moss. Ilara stepped onto the metal grate. It groaned. "There, on the bridge," Sheriff Miller's voice echoed. Ilara turned. Miller stood at the tree line, 30 yards away, a rifle raised to his shoulder. He wasn't wearing his uniform anymore. He was wearing tactical gear. "Give me the drive, Ilara. Nobody has to die here except the dog. You killed my brother. Your brother was a Boy Scout who didn't understand how the world works. Now step away from the dog." Ilara backed up. Titan stood in front of her, growling, a wall of defiance. Miller fired. He didn't aim for Ilara. He aimed for Titan. The bullet caught Titan in the shoulder. The force of the impact lifted the 90-pound dog off his feet. He yelped, a sound that tore Ilara's heart in two, and slammed into the railing of the bridge. The rusted metal gave way. "Titan!" Ilara lunged for him, grabbing his collar just as he went over the edge. She slammed onto her stomach on the wet grate, her arm wrenched nearly out of its socket. Titan dangled 40 feet above the churning black water, blood pouring from his shoulder, his eyes wide with panic. He was heavy. Too heavy. Ilara was slipping. The wet grate offered no traction. She looked up. Sheriff Miller was walking calmly onto the bridge, the rifle lowered. He was smiling. "Let him go, Ilara. Or you go with him." This was it. The end. She couldn't pull Titan up. She couldn't fight Miller. She was holding onto a dying dog with one hand, slipping inch by inch toward the abyss. Titan looked up at her. The panic in his eyes faded, replaced by that same calm intelligence she had seen at the funeral. He stopped struggling. He looked at Ilara, then at the water below. He whimpered once, softly. He was going to let go. He was going to sacrifice himself to save her from being pulled over. "No. We go together." Just as Miller raised the rifle to finish them both, a blinding light flooded the bridge. The roar of a helicopter rotor beat the air into submission. "State Police, drop the weapon." Miller froze, shielding his eyes. Ilara hadn't just watched the video on the SD card. Before Miller arrived at her house, she had done the one thing Caleb had told her to do in an emergency. She had emailed the file to the State Attorney General's private tip line. Miller looked at the helicopter, then at Ilara. He raised the rifle one last time, deciding to take them down with him. But he forgot about Titan. Even dangling over the edge, bleeding out, the Malinois had one fight left. Titan swung his body, using Alara's grip as a pivot point, and clamped his jaws onto the edge of the bridge grating. He scrambled, claws sparking on the metal, and hauled himself up with a groan of agony. Miller pulled the trigger. Click! A misfire. Titan didn't hesitate. He launched himself on 3 legs. He hit Miller in the midsection, driving the sheriff backward. Miller screamed as Titan's jaws found his forearm, crushing bone. They tangled on the slick bridge, the man and the wounded dog. Miller punched Titan's gunshot wound, but the dog didn't let go. He held on with the ferocity of a creature who knew this was his final mission. State troopers swarmed the bridge from the far side. "Get the dog off! Get him off!" "Titan, Os, let go!" Titan locked eyes with Alara. He held for 1 more second, making sure Miller was subdued, then released. He collapsed onto the wet metal, his chest heaving, blood pooling around him. Sheriff Brody Miller was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming curses. The paramedics rushed past him, straight to the dog. Alara sat in the rain, pulling Titan's heavy head into her lap. "Stay with me, buddy. You stayed with Caleb. You have to stay with me." Titan's breathing was shallow. He licked her hand, a rough, weak rasp. The sun was shining in Oakhaven. The town square was packed. But this time, it wasn't a funeral. Alara stood at the podium. She looked different, stronger. Beside her, sitting with a slight limp but looking majestic in a new vest, was Titan. They tried to bury the truth. They thought a dog couldn't testify. They thought a dog couldn't remember. She looked down at Titan. He was scanning the crowd, ever watchful, ever loyal. But they forgot one thing. A shepherd doesn't just herd the sheep. He hunts the wolves. She placed a medal around Titan's neck. The Medal of Valor. The crowd erupted in cheers. Titan didn't care about the applause. He leaned his weight against Alara's leg, closed his eyes, and finally, for the first time since Caleb died, he let out a long, peaceful sigh. He was off duty. He was home. The bond between a human and a dog transcends death, danger, and time itself. If Titan's loyalty moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to believe in heroes today. And don't forget to subscribe to Shepherds of Hope. We have more stories to tell, and the next one might just change your life.